So, hello, my name is Salman. I would like to explain you something in your comprehensive exam. So let's go to the details. Okay, so question number one. So again, when you analyze an ELT research, you're essentially evaluating the researcher's approach and the rigor of the investigation, understanding the underlying methodological choices, which is crucial for determining the credibility and trustworthiness of the findings. So, so now let's have a look at research approach. So research approach, basically we have like quantitative, like for example, to focus on collecting and analyzing numerical data, right, to identify patterns, relationships, causal effects, for example. And we have qualitative, right, seeks to understand meaning, experiences, and perspective of participants through non-numerical data such as interviews, observations, and textual analysis. So examples in NLT include like case study of individual language learners. Yeah. So, and next we have mixed methods which combine both quantitative and qualitative approaches within a single study to provide a more comprehensive understanding of research problem. So an ELT study might use a survey to gather broad data on students' attitude toward online learning, and then you can conduct follow-up interviews with a subset of students to explore their experience in more details. So in research designs, so this is a specific framework, right? Or you can say it's blueprints for conducting the research, the study. So we have experimental designs, for example, randomized or controlled trials, experimental designs. So this is to aim to establish cause and effect relationships by manipulating one or more independent variables and measuring their impact on a dependent variable. So it's often involved control groups for comparisons. So in LT, an experimental designs could test the effectiveness of a new vocabulary learning app by randomly assigning students to use the app in the experimental group and continue with the traditional methods, or you can say control group, and then comparing their vocabulary test scores. So next you have correlational designs, which is to examine the relationships between two or more variables without manipulating them. So they determine the strength and directions of an association. So for example, in ELT study might use correlational design to investigate the relationship between students' motivations level and their English speaking fluency. So next we have survey designs to collect data from a large sample using questionnaires or interviews to describe characteristics, attitudes, or behavior of a population. So for example, an ELT survey might investigate teachers' perceptions of the challenges of teaching English to students with diverse learning needs. And next you have case study designs, which involve an in-depth investigation of single individual or group events or contexts. For example, an ELT case study might focus on the language learning journey of a highly successful multilingual individual, for example. So we have action research design. So this is to a cyclical, right, process of planning, acting, observing, and reflecting, so often conducted by teachers in their own classroom to address specific problems or improve their practice. So for example, in an ELT, action research might involve a teacher trying out a new feedback techniques on student writing and then reflecting on its impact. Okay, so this is basically what is it about. and for participants and sampling. So understanding who participated in the study and how they were selected is crucial for evaluating the generalizability of the findings. So consider the characteristic of sampling, for example, age, proficiency, background, for example, and sampling methods. A thesis could clearly describe the participant selection process and discuss any potential limitations related to the sample. So for the data collection instruments, the tools, which is the tools used to gather data, must be valid, measuring what they intend to measure, and reliable, which means consistent in their measurement. When analyzing a study or research, consider the types of instrument used. For example, standardized tests, researcher developed questionnaires, interviews protocols, observation schedules, for example. So this is what this is about. Now let's go to the next slide, which is primary data and secondary data. So primary data, like think of primary data as first-hand evidence you gather yourself. It's tailored specifically to your research questions. So the researcher designed data collection methods and directly interacts with the participant or the phenomenon being studied. So for example, think aloud protocol, asking language learners to verbalize their thought processes while completing reading or writing tasks, or eye tracking data, recording learners' eye movement while they read text in English to understand their processing strategies, for example. And secondary data, which mean like secondary data is like using existing information. It was collected for different purpose but can be analyzed to answer your research question. So the advantages of secondary data includes its accessibility, potential cost, effectiveness, and the possibility of analyzing large data sets. However, the data might not be perfectly aligned with your research questions, and you have no control over its quality, right? So, for example, transcript of spoken English from language corpora, or results from large-scale language proficiency tests, or student essays or assignments from previous semester, for example, policy documents related to language education, for example. So what is the importance of pilot testing? So pilot testing goes beyond just checking if your questionnaire prints correctly. It's a crucial step in ensuring the quality and effectiveness of your entire research design. Think of it as a dress rehearsal before the main performance, right? So it's significant to refine research instruments, right, for clarity and ambiguity, right? So access, feasibility, and practically, right? And also to estimate time, resource in more details, for example. So to improve validity and reliability, right, by addressing issues identified during pilot testing, you can significantly enhance the validity or reliability of the research instrument and procedures. So this ultimately leads to more trustworthy and credible findings. So in ELT research, right, pilot setting is particularly important because language learning and teaching are complex human processes influenced by numerous factors, and pilot setting can help ensure that language tests are at appropriate difficulty level for the target learners, that interview questions are culturally sensitive and elicit meaningful responses, and that classroom interventions are practical and feasible in real-world education settings. Okay, now let's go to principal sampling methods in ELT research, right? So choosing the right sampling method is critical. It's very important for ensuring that your research findings can be appropriately generalized and that you are able to answer your research questions effectively. So let's have a look at many types of sampling methods. For example, you have like simple random sampling, right? So every individual in the defined population has an equal and independent chance of being selected. So this minimizes bias but requires complete and accurate list of the entire populations. So in NLT, for example, if you wanted to study the attitudes of all English language learners in specific university, you would need a complete list of enrolled students. You could then assign each student a number and use random number generator to select your sample. And stratified random sampling. So the population is divided into homogeneous subgroups based on characteristics relevant to the research questions. Yeah, for example, proficiency level, age group, first language. Then a random sample is drawn from each stratum. This ensures that different subgroups are adequately represented in this sample, which is particularly useful when you expect these characteristics to influence the variables you're studying. So for example, in NLT example, if you're investigating the impact of a new teaching method on different proficiency levels, you would first divide your student population into proficiency strata. For example, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. Then you would randomly select a proportional number of students from each level to ensure your sample includes sufficient representation from each group. And yeah, and you have purposive sampling, which is the researcher, right? You deliberately selects participants who possess specific characteristics or expertise relevant to their research question. This is useful for in-depth study of particular groups or phenomena. So for example, in NLT, interviewing experienced English language teachers who are known for their innovative teaching techniques to gather insight into best practice, or selecting students who have shown significant improvement in their English proficiency to understand the factors contributing to their success. And that's all for my presentation, and I hope you understand. And I would like to finish my presentation. Thank you for your attention.